everyone. My name is Christina, and today I'm excited to talk to you about my favorite topic, innovation. When I was a kid, I loved Beauty and the Beast. It was my favorite Disney movie, and Belle was the nerd princess, so I identified with her. But even more than Belle, I knew that when I grew up, I wanted to do whatever it is that her father did. Maurice was an inventor, and in the movie, he invents this wood chopping machine, this automated wood chopping machine. And Disney portrays Maurice as kind of an eccentric character. You know, he works alone in his workshop, and he doesn't really talk to anyone. But I believe that Maurice is much more of an entrepreneur. At this point in the movie, he's actually going off into the market to sell his invention. So I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. And based on cartoons, I thought all you really need to be an inventor is a lab, right? And that's actually why I went into comp sci, because you don't even need a lab. You just need a laptop. And so that's what I do today. I am a self-declared innovation engineer, but I'm an architect that focuses on the early stages of product development and rapid prototyping. Happily ever after, right? Well, not exactly. It turns out the real world is a bit more complicated than these children's cartoons will have you believe. And sometimes when you're working at a big company, it can be easy to feel like a small cog in a large system. And it takes a lot of spin to get your ideas out into the market. So this is exactly the space that I've been pushing for and playing with, and that's exactly what I want to talk to you today about. So I'll share with you the pipeline that I've come up with for driving innovation, especially entrepreneurship, so when you're working within a company. We'll start this process with the spark of an idea. And the first half of the process is about turning that idea spark into what I call an idea package, and showing that this is something that can be meaningful, that is novel, and that can have an impact. The second half of this is all about scaling up that idea. Now you have something that you believe is impactful. How do you actually make it happen? And lastly, I'll walk you through some case studies about making this a reality. So let's start with this first half. I mentioned earlier that every innovation starts with the spark of an idea. So I want you to think about some idea that you can take back to your company, your product, whatever it is you're working on. This can come from anyone, it can come anytime, and the importance of diversity and inclusion and psychological safety is exactly here, because new ideas, great ideas, can come from anyone as long as we're willing to listen. The first step here is to take that thought and turn it into a thing. And so what I mean by that is you need to make it tangible, whether it's building a coded prototype, a paper prototype, a sketch, a YouTube video, whatever your method of expression is, you want to be able to point to something and say, this is my invention. Because once you have that, you can then start collecting data on it, whether it is putting it in front of customers and seeing how they respond to it, or whether it's collecting things like performance improvements or whatever it is that your invention does. And lastly, make sure to document everything. At the end of this, you have three things. You have some sort of tangible way to express your invention, a prototype or something like that. You have data that you've collected based on real customers, and you have documented all of your learnings. This means that this idea can be picked up at any time in the future. It's something that anyone can build upon, and it's something that you can decide, hey, I'll pick it up later, or I'll push to advocate to scale it up now. Before I go on to the rest of the process, you'll notice that this feels kind of like the scientific method. And it is inspired by that. And I originally did use the scientific method when I was leading innovation days on my team. But what I found was there's a certain class of problems where you don't always know what the question is. You don't always know how to articulate it in a hypothesis. Sometimes you just want to say, what if I use this technology? What's possible? And so that's why I don't use the scientific method exactly. The other thing this is inspired by is the Silicon Valley product group's 4 big risks. So I'm focusing on the feasibility and valuability parts in here. And this is my favorite part of work, right? Like exploration, idea exploration is so much fun. I love hackathons. You can do design sprints. We've done innovation sprints or innovation days, or, you don't even have to write code. It could be vision types. So this isn't necessarily limited to only developers. So once you have an idea package, at this point, you have a decision. Either you shelf it, maybe the data that you have is inconclusive, or maybe there's a little bit of work that's needed before you're ready to put it out into the market. And that's totally okay. That's a decision you can make at this point. And because your idea package is placed in a public space, anyone can pick it up in the future. The second option is to scale it up. So at this point, you need to understand what type of innovation you have so that you can scale it up effectively. And there's 3 types that I'll point out: disruptovation, sustainovations, and maintainovations. And depending on the life cycle of your product, your idea can flow between these as well. So we'll dive into these in a bit more depth. A disruptovation is an innovation that solves a new problem with a new solution, and there's no existing team to handle it. So again, it's a new problem and a new solution. So what's an example of this? The iPhone. When the iPhone first came out, Apple didn't have a phone department, right? Like, someone had to come up with the idea of, hey, we're going to make an iPhone. And that wasn't Steve Jobs. It was one of the engineers that proposed the idea and then got buy-in from Steve Jobs. But in this case, if you have an idea that's really disruptive in this way, there's no product manager that you can go to and say like, hey, let's work on this, because they already have a product that they're working in. And there's no tech lead that you can really go to because, again, they already have their products and agendas. So this is the most difficult thing to get buy-in for, because you have to go straight up to like executive sponsors, or some companies will have an innovation team that's focused on specifically this kind of work. And to prove that this is something that's worth solving, you need to show that this is a meaningful problem to solve, and that the solution is something new, novel, like no one in the industry is doing it. So we have some sort of competitive advantage. Usually disruptovations are the ones that are most patentable. So next, we have sustainovations. So this is an innovation that is talking about incrementally improving an existing solution. So there's already a team built around it, and it's kind of like this image, you're like raking in more cash, right? Like you're improving the solution in some way. So the iPhone evolution might be an example of this. I think this is an oversimplification. There's a lot that goes into this, but the idea is you already have a product and you're kind of building the next version of it. You're solving the same problems, but maybe a little bit more. And so in this case, there's usually already a product team that's built around it. So you can work with the product manager or the product owner in order to get buy-in. And similar to before, you just have to prove that there's a return on investment here, right? By doing this much work, we're going to improve the customer experience by XYZ. So really understanding that it's a sustainovation can help you reach the right person in order to make this idea happen. And lastly is what I call a maintainovation. As the name might imply, it is all about innovations that reduce the effort to maintain some product or some piece of solution. And so in this case, there's already an existing team. And an example of this might be, improving the manufacturing processes so that it's more ecologically friendly. And in this case, you need to get buy-in from the tech lead, because tech leads and engineering managers, they're the ones that see that the engineers are feeling the pain point, right? So in this case, that's who you need to go to in order to get this prioritized. And to prove that you want to do this, you need to show that developers really do need this. It's something that they want and that they would use. And show how much savings you're going to get in terms of cost, time, effort, energy, that this is going to be impactful. So those are the 3 types of innovations that I've found as I'm pushing for innovation in my company. These methods were inspired by a few different things. One is, you might have heard of the 70, 20, 10% time. You spend 70% of your time on product development, 20% on tech debt, and 10% on innovation. We used this model initially for like 10% innovation time, but it quickly evolves into counting your hours, because how do you measure 10%, which I didn't love. The other thing I want to mention is sometimes you do just need to pay off tech debt or do product development. Not everything is innovation, right? So a maintainonovation is when you're inventing some sort of new invention or technology in order to make maintenance easier. But not all tech debt, paying down tech debt, is maintainonovation. So it's not an exact one-to-one, but just a rough something to use as inspiration. The other thing that inspires this is the Kayastha framework, which says that depending on the type of problem you're solving, your strategy needs to change. So a chaotic space is when you don't even know what question to ask and you don't know what the solution is. That's kind of where the exploration part of this pipeline falls in. Then you move into complex problems where you know what the problem is, but you have no idea what the solution is. And so that might be more the disruptovation, where you're very early in the product development life cycle. And all the way down to clear, where you know what the problem is, you know what the solution is, you just have to turn the crank. And that's what maintainovations solve. So these are just some ways of thinking about innovation. There's many different frameworks. This one's mine. I want to share with you also a few case studies about how I've used this. So at Vistaprint, I work on the design technologies team. And what Vistaprint, we sell marketing materials to small businesses. It's an e-commerce site, but there's also kind of like this Paint Photoshop-like experience where you customize your products. And so that's where I play. And so I've been using this model as I've been learning about and building this model over time as I've been working on different projects here. So the first example I want to talk you through is sustainovations. So one of the ideas that this came up, one of the ideas that this started with is Vistaprint sells like different kinds of finishes, you have shiny business cards, golden business cards. And so one of the pain points is customers can't really see what is shiny when they're designing their business card. And so the thought was, can we use CSS in order to show what parts of the business card are golden? And so the first thing I did was hack it, right? So this is like 40 lines of code that I copy pasted and, I edited right in the Chrome DevTools to just hack the CSS and show that you can actually use CSS to show a gold shimmer. And so this proves out the technology that it is possible. One of the mistakes I made at this point is that I didn't spend the time to really prove out the customer value. And so although I documented it and I shared this widely, this project kind of sat in that idea package stage, right? Like it didn't get prioritized. It wasn't something that product managers really got excited about. But that was okay because it was documented. I had my code repo. I could pick it up, and I did 6 months later when I had more time. So at this point, what I did was I did a second round of prototypes based on the same code, but then I actually ran user testing with it. So we used usertesting.com online, and I did like 30 user tests or something, and I collected quotes, like real quotes from people that said like, hey, this is an amazing experience, or this makes me feel really excited about this product. And so again, this is an incremental improvement on our existing design experience. So I documented all of this. And then when I shared it, I was much more targeted, where I shared it with the owners of this application. And so in this case, I did get buy-in. The product manager was like, yes, we should definitely build this. And I'm going to give you one of my teams, 4 devs, for 2 months. And we're going to go ahead and prioritize this work. So I worked with them. The idea was patented. It got into production. It was A/B tested, and it got launched. So that was an example of a successful sustainovation. Okay, second case study, maintainovations. So this is kind of like your standard migration. We had a studio application that was using really old technology, Backbone.js, that we wanted to migrate off of and use React. The idea Spark actually came from a different team. There was a platform team that built an underlying library where they had already done the upgrade. But the problem was the application team just hadn't done, hadn't had the time in order to prioritize actually making the migration. So it was sitting as an idea package that this other platform team had already published. There was documentation on how to use it, but it got stuck. And so I was in like the second round of this exploration where I was like, okay, let's build a prototype. So the first thing I did was build a very hacky prototype. This is the final version. It looks really pretty, but the first version was very hacky, where it just swapped out the internal library. I collected some data by talking to different tech leads. I worked directly with 2 engineers that were more senior than me, and I got their buy-in. So they jumped in on the project, helped make some improvements, and eventually we got buy-in from all of the different tech leads. Again, since this is a maintainovations, the pain is felt by the engineers. And so we really needed them in order to have the buy-in. So we documented all of our learnings, how much work this would be, what advantages we would get, how much time we would save, and that was our idea package. At this point, when we scaled it up, it was very much engineering driven, where all the tech leads kind of went to the PMs and were like, we need to do this work. We've proven it out. We believe it's going to be valuable. So this project, in the end, I think over 40 developers touched it. It took a year to get it done, but we're at a much better place now in order to do more innovation in the future. And that's something that's powerful about maintainovations. Sometimes it gets like, it's not as shiny and new, but it is very important because we have limited resources. And unless we free up those resources by coming up with creative ways of maintaining our existing code bases, we won't be able to do those other kinds of innovations. So this last one is called Studio Live, and the spark of this came from a conference, not unlike this one. It was called The Future of Web Apps, and someone was sharing about a new way of doing real-time databases. This was like back in 2015. And so the spark of the idea was, hey, could we use a real-time database in order to create some sort of co-collaboration in our design application? So I built a prototype. Again, this is the final version. The original version was much more scrappy, but you could edit in one screen and you'd see the updates in the other and vice versa. So you could have any number of people collaborating on the design. And so in this case, again, this was early in my career. I didn't collect as much data, but we already had data that was showing that this was a pain point for customers. I documented my learnings and I presented it to anyone that would listen. I talked to product managers, to tech leads, to product managers in adjacent teams. I even did like a company-wide lightning talk about it, but the project got stuck. I heard the same thing over and over again. This is a great idea and we think you should do it, but we don't have time in our backlog to do it. Every single team I talked to said the same thing. Why is that? Because this project was at the intersection of two domains. It wasn't purely a design technology because it required having our internal designers and that team to work on it. And it didn't purely fit in the other side either because it needed work from, the studio team. And so because of this, the project sort of stagnated. And it was in this idea package stage for a while, for 2 years actually. It was sitting in my box. And so I would share this every opportunity it came up. And luckily, one day we had a new innovation team that was focused on new business models for the company. So this is exactly the space that they were focused on. And I was talking to one of the devs, shared this idea, and he was able to pick back up right where I left it off. So again, that's the power of documenting what you've done. And so the innovation team then built the second version of this. The idea was patented. We worked with the executives to get a whole team dedicated to this project. And so a whole new team was spun up in order to work on this. And that was, and then they continued to innovate on this, improving the internal dashboards and how you manage these sessions. And today it's more in the maintenance stage where we're trying to reduce costs of the backend database. And so with that, those are 3 examples of different types of innovations, different case studies. I want to leave you with some takeaways. 1, on the exploration side, make sure that you're creating time and creating a safe space for people to explore new ideas. I love hackathons. I've done dozens of them, so if you want to talk about that, come and chat with me afterwards. But scheduling a hackathon can be the easiest way to create space for exploration. The most important thing is that you're breaking down the silos between functional functions, so getting designers and engineers and product in the room, and then also that you are creating space for different teams to work across silos. Second, make sure to set the expectations to share documentation and learnings. So this could be something simple like creating a wiki space and saying hey, now it's expected. Everyone, when you do some exploration, make a page here, create a template. It can be super simple. And third, experiment with how you want ideas to scale in your company. This is what has worked for me, but maybe there's something different that works for your company or for your teams. As a leader, all you really need to do is write up these expectations and then they will evolve, retrospect on them and evolve it. But I hope that these 3 things help you get started with an innovation pipeline in your own space. And that's all I have for you guys. I hope this has been helpful to walk you all the way from the spark of an idea to an idea package to the different types of innovations that you can have to a realized customer impact. Thank you very much. If you want to come chat with me, I'm Christy Kayastha online, and I'm Christina Kayastha on LinkedIn. Thanks.
Wonderful job, Christina.